With all due respect, sir, we've been doing this for 6 years. We don't need a civilian explaining wind to us. The words sliced through. The hot desert air at the Twentynine Palms, scout sniper, range-spoken, by a Marine sergeant who clearly had more confidence than accuracy that morning for 3 straight hours. An elite foreman sniper team had been trying to hit a target sitting 2,000 yards away, and for 3 straight hours they hadn't connected once. The elderly man standing quietly behind the firing line in his sun-bleached jacket and John Deere cap had softly suggested they were misreading the wind and forgetting to account for the Coriolis effect at extreme distance. They'd chuckled, dismissing him without a second thought. Then he picked up the rifle, made 2 small adjustments, and hit dead center on his first shot. If you believe experience deserves respect, no matter the age or appearance, type honor in the comments. His name was Robert Chen, but in his former life, men called him Ghost. At 71, Robert lived alone in a modest house in Yucca Valley, about 40 minutes from the Marine base. His days were predictable: coffee on the porch at sunrise, afternoons tinkering with old rifles in his garage, evenings silent enough to hear the wind brushing through the Joshua trees. He'd been a widower for 6 years. His 2 daughters lived across the country with families of their own. They called on Sundays. He always said he was fine and most days. He meant it. But the only time Robert truly felt alive anymore was when he visited the base. Maybe once every couple of months, when the loneliness or silence grew too heavy, he'd drive out to Twentynine Palms and park near the public areas where you could faintly hear rifle fire. The crack of distant rounds reminded him of who he used to be. No one recognized him now. Why would they? He'd retired in 2003. Entire Marine generations had come and gone. To them, he was just another old veteran lingering near the sound of a life that had moved. On the morning of October 14th, he'd gone to the base on a whim. The desert was breathtaking, that day-crisp autumn air. Visibility so sharp it felt like you could see to the horizon. He parked near the Scout Sniper Complex, a secured area where the Corps trained its best marksmen. You weren't supposed to see the ranges from the public side, but Robert knew the spots where the terrain gave you a view. Old habits. That's when he saw something odd. At the 2,000-yard Lena position, he knew intimately an entire sniper team was struggling. Through his old Leica binoculars, he watched for Marines at the firing point with 2 instructors and a senior officer evaluating each attempt. Shot fired, scopes checked, heads shaking, over and over. After an hour, Robert's professional instincts overwhelmed his caution. He moved closer, using a maintenance access road technically off limits, but seldom checked. His knees ached with each step, old parachute injuries that never healed properly. But his mind was sharp as ever. The wind was swirling from the southwest at around 12 to 15 miles per hour, gusting higher. At 2,000 yards in these conditions, it wasn't just wind drift. You had to factor in the Coriolis effect, the Earth's rotation nudging the bullet. Most shooters ignored it. Many never learned it right. He was within 100 yards when a Marine corporal spotted him. "Sir, you can't be here. This is restricted." Robert stopped and raised his hands. "Sorry, I was watching from the ridge and got curious. I'll head back." But he didn't move. Yet because he'd seen a technical mistake, that made every instinct in him itch. The spotter, the Marine lying beside the shooter, was giving wind calls that were fundamentally wrong. He was reading mirage correctly at the firing line, but ignoring the layered winds scattered across the long distance. At 2,000 yards, you could have completely different wind behavior at 300, 800, 1,300. And near the target, "They're reading the wind wrong," Robert murmured. The corporal frowned. "Sir, you need to leave. Now." One of the instructors, a gunnery sergeant built like a gym rat, walked over, sizing up Robert with the practiced look reserved for confused senior citizens. "Sir, this is an active training area. You need to go, of course." Robert nodded politely. "I didn't mean to intrude, but before I go, your team has been missing that target for hours." "I think I know why." The gunny stiffened. "Excuse me?" "The wind. Your spotter's only reading the mirage here. At 800 yards, the wind is shifting 15 degrees. And at the target, it's almost due west, continued calmly. At 2,000 yards, you're also fighting Coriolis drift about 8 inches to the right at this latitude. Your shooter is compensating for wind, but not the Earth's rotation. The gunny stared at him, then let out a short, patronizing laugh. Sir, these Marines are scout snipers. They know how to read wind. They definitely know about Coriolis. Another sniper called out. They were ready. The gunny motioned Robert away. Robert simply asked, then why have they missed every shot for 3 hours? The range went silent. Finally, the gunny snapped. Corporal, escort him out. If he refuses, get the MPs. Robert nodded. I meant no disrespect. I was only trying to help. He turned to leave, but a voice from the firing point cut through the air. Hold on. Let him speak. Everyone turned. A weathered man in his mid-40s walked toward them, eyes fixed on Robert with an intensity that hinted at recognition. What's your name? Robert Chen, sir? Prior service? Yes, sir. Retired Marine. 2003. What unit? Robert hesitated. This was always the moment everything changed. 1st Marine Division. Scout Sniper Instructor School, Quantico. The Major's eyes widened. Rank. Master Gunnery Sergeant. And before you were an instructor? A quiet sigh. 2nd Force Reconnaissance? Scout Sniper. 26 years in recon and sniper units before training command. The Major stared for a long moment, then snapped to attention and saluted sharply. Master Guns Chen. Sir, I'm Major David Rodriguez. I was in your advanced course in 2001. You might not remember me, but every Marine who trained under you remembers you. Robert returned the salute automatically. Rodriguez. You were the lieutenant who preferred the M24 because you couldn't get comfortable with the M4A1. The Major grinned. You really do remember. You spent hours fixing my trigger control. Your voice is still in my head every time I squeeze a shot. The gunny had gone pale. The sniper team drifted closer, drawn by the sudden shift. Rodriguez raised his voice for all to hear. Master Guns. Chen is arguably the most accomplished scout sniper in Marine Corps history. 3 tours in Vietnam. 2 in Beirut. 1 in Panama. Both Gulf Wars. 117 confirmed kills. And more importantly, he wrote the Scout Sniper Manual. Every technique you've ever used, every wind-reading method, all traces back to him. Silence. Shock. Realization. The gunny finally whispered, Sir, I had no idea. I'm sorry. You were doing your job, Robert said gently. I shouldn't have been here. But you were right about the wind, weren't you? Rodriguez asked. Robert looked at the distant target. At this distance, today's conditions give you 3 separate wind layers. Near us, it's southwest 12 to 15 miles per hour. At 800 yards, it shifts almost due south. At the target, it's west or northwest. The bullet's in flight nearly 3 seconds. It passes through all 3 layers, each pushing it differently. Total drift? 4 feet. But not in the direction they're correcting for. One of the snipers, a lean, sharp-eyed sergeant who looked every bit the seasoned professional, finally spoke up. We've been compensating about 3.2 feet left, assuming the wind averages 12 miles per hour from the southwest. That's the issue, Robert replied calmly. You're treating winds like a single number. They don't behave that way. At 800 yards, the wind is stronger and coming from a slightly different angle. It's dragging your rounds south more than west. But near the target, the wind weakens and shifts to the west, nudging your bullet back east. These layers don't cancel each other out, they stack. You can't average them. You have to read each level on its own and estimate the total push and the Coriolis effect. Another sniper asked. At 2,000 yards at this latitude, you're talking about 8 to 10 inches of drift to the right, Robert said. Not enough to miss the whole target, but enough to turn a solid hit into a marginal one. At long distances, even the Earth's rotation becomes a variable. That bullet's in flight long enough that the target has literally shifted by the time the round arrives. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. Master Guns. Would you be willing to show us? The gunnery sergeant hesitated. Sir, is that even allowed? No offense to Master Guns Chen, but regulations about civilian handling of weapons, Rodriguez cut him off. Master Gunshin has logged more hours behind a scope than this entire firing line combined, and he still holds his expert qualification. I checked his file just now. He trains twice a year at a civilian range and still shoots like a Marine. He's only a civilian on paper. A warmth spread through Robert's chest at those words. Major, I appreciate that, but it's been years since I've engaged anything at 2,000 yards. I'm not sure I'm with respect, sir, the Major said firmly. I watched you break down this entire range in barely a minute and diagnose problems we've been fighting all morning. It would be an honor if you demonstrated. With respect, sir, the Major said firmly. I watched you break down this entire range in barely a minute and diagnose problems we've been fighting all morning. It would be an honor if you demonstrated. They walked to the firing point together. The Marines gathered around Robert, suddenly more like students gathering around a master craftsman. The rifle waiting for him was an M4A5. Bolt-action sniper rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. Robert lifted it with reverence, feeling the familiar balance settle naturally into his hands. It had been years, but his body remembered. Instinct took over. He eased into the prone position. His joints complained the ground was unforgiving to a 71-year-old body, but once he settled in, the alignment felt perfect. Felt inevitable. Felt like returning home, spotter, he said softly, slipping back into the old rhythm of command. The sergeant slid into position beside him with a high-power spotting scope. Ready, Master Guns? Robert chambered around, the bolt locking smoothly. He inhaled slowly through the nose, exhaled through the mouth, letting his heart settle into a quiet cadence. The target 2,000 yards away was barely more than a speck, a distant silhouette wavering in the heat. Wind at firing point, 12 to 15 from the southwest, he murmured. Vegetation at 800 southerly gusts, maybe 18. Target flag week west, 8 to 10. 3 wind layers. He adjusted the elevation turret. Click, click, click. Then windage. Click, click, click. He wasn't compensating for a single wind. He was mapping the entire atmosphere between him and the target layer by layer adding the extra Coriolis, adjustment that most shooters ignored completely. Paused his breathing at the natural respiratory pause. His finger touched the trigger pad, not the joint, not the tip, but the exact placement he had taught thousands of Marines. The break was so clean, it surprised even him. The rifle thundered. 3 eternal seconds passed. Impact. The spotter called out, voice cracking. Center, masthead center. Robert worked the bolt smoothly and chambered another round. Let's confirm. One shot could be luck. Another shot, another 3-second eternity. Impact. 1 inch right of the first hole. Robert fired a third time. Impact. 3 rounds, center mass. A perfect 3-inch group at 2,000 yards. He cleared the rifle and rose slowly, knees protesting every inch. Major Rodriguez helped him up as the firing line stood silent, stunned. The old man had accomplished in moments what they'd failed to do all morning. The key, Robert said, slipping naturally into instructor mode, is to stop thinking of wind as a single force. At long distance, you're firing through an atmosphere made of layers. Near wind, mid-range wind, far wind, they all matter, he pointed at the field. Look, they're 800 yards out. Those bushes are moving harder than anything near the firing point. That means the wind is strongest there. But look at the target flag, it's barely moving. The mid-range wind is what dominates this shot, but you can never ignore the others. The young sergeant who'd been shooting earlier stepped forward. Master Guns, I owe you an apology. We were arrogant. You were confident, Robert corrected. Confidence is useful, but confidence without humility gets people killed. The moment you think you know everything, you stop learning. For the next 2 hours, Robert trained them wind reading. Micromirage interpretation, field indicators, Coriolis math. an instinct born only from years behind a scope. One by one, the snipers started hitting the 2,000-yard target consistently. Not perfectly, but consistently enough to survive on a battlefield. During a break, the gunnery sergeant approached him. "Master Guns, I behaved poorly earlier. My comments were out of line." Robert shook his head. "Gunny, you did your job. A random old man walked onto your range. You protected your Marines, but you judged my value by appearance. That's the part you need to learn from." He smiled faintly. "Never assume anyone has nothing to teach you." Later that afternoon, Rodriguez approached with a serious expression. "Master Guns, the course has a problem. We're producing scout snipers faster than we can train them properly. We've lost the knowledge your generation bled for. We need instructors, people like you. The contractor pay isn't much, but you'd have base access, range time, and the chance to train the next generation." Robert looked out across the desert. He thought of his empty home, his quiet days, and the fire he felt come alive again that morning. "I'll think about it," he said. But he already knew the answer. 2 weeks later, Robert Chen became a civilian scout sniper instructor, 3 days a week. He taught advanced marksmanship, wind reading, and the hard-earned wisdom of 40 years behind a scope. His home was still empty, but his days finally mattered again. The gunnery sergeant who once dismissed him became one of his strongest supporters. The sergeant who couldn't hit the 2,000-yard target earned his hog's tooth and later used Robert's wind-reading lessons in Syria, saving American lives. A Marine had filmed Robert's demonstration. The video went viral, millions of views. Thousands of comments from former snipers who'd underestimated old veterans in their youth, but Robert didn't care about any of that. He cared about the Marines who stayed after class to ask questions, who respected him not for his age, but for his mastery, who listened to the wisdom he'd spent a lifetime earning. On his 72nd birthday, a package arrived from new Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez. Inside was a custom Leupold scope engraved, "Master Guns Chen, the ghost who taught us to read the wind." Below it were dozens of signatures every Marine he had trained that year. Robert mounted the scope onto his old M4A3, the same rifle he'd carried in his final active duty years. He still shot twice a month. Still a qualified expert, because true mastery isn't about age. It's about time, experience, lessons learned through hardship, wisdom earned the slow, honest way. Robert Chen proved that on a quiet October morning, when he reminded a new generation that the old veteran they dismissed might be the expert they desperately needed. If you believe we should never judge someone's worth by age or appearance, if you respect the wisdom of those who walk the path before us, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs the reminder, because that quiet old man on the firing line, he might just be the master who can teach you how to survive.